Hello and welcome back to another YouTube video. Today I'm going to be doing my 14.13 jungle tier list. So if you have content, like, subscribe, and let's get into it. We saw a pretty big swing and a lot of the AP junglers this patch. I believe they are doing more next patch, but for the moment it's been primarily Karthus, Talia, Brand. We saw a nerf to Gragas, which indirectly affects him in the jungle. Same goes for Skarner, and then on top of this we saw some other shifts around. We saw some buffs towards the likes of Lee Sin, Graves, Zac obviously did get nerfed for top lane as well, ended up being relatively neutral, but let's cover the changes. So to begin with, the D tier is actually going to have two more champions added here, so Garen and Malphite, both these champions see enough play rate that I can kind of put them in the jungle tier list, and it makes some level of sense. Obviously, we saw recently in the NNO Cup, Garen get played, and honestly, we saw a bit of a spike in his play rate because of this, which is why I'm including him here. I wouldn't really recommend it. It was very much a one-off situation of a steal away from a Garen OTP. In Malphite's case, he's also very much an underperforming jungle, doesn't clear very well, very reliant on his ultimate, doesn't really have much dueling capability, so they both go in the D tier. On top of this, Silas, it deserves, well, I mean, Silas underperforms for the jungle. Same level of bad as for like some Malphite and Garen? No, but he still doesn't perform great. His clear, once again, still isn't great. It's not very healthy. His dueling potential isn't bad, but he's a bit like old Twitch, where you are very reliant on getting kills, snowballing, and kind of being able to power an advantage with the likes of a Medjay or a Darksteel into a Medjay, going Lichbane, playing Electrocute or Dark Harvest, and then, yeah, snowballing the game. Wouldn't really recommend it though, unless you are very proficient at Silas. Same goes for Rengar. Well, in Rengar's case, he's not as unhealthy in the jungle clear aspect as Silas. Like, Silas is very much a mid laner push towards being a jungle. Rengar is a very elite skewed jungler. So champion is incredibly hard to pilot. He's also a bit on the weak side at the moment. Probably does need some level of buff, but he's underperforming at the moment. He also belongs in the D tier. Moving on to the C tier, we've seen a bit of a play rate increase for Maokai. He's being bumped back into the tier list in the C tier. He still underperforms for the average player in solo queue. Just see some level of competitive play as being a very low econ jungler. It's very hard to have an impact on this champion unless you are very, very far ahead and you're opting into like a Leandri's first strike variant. But then it can be quite punishing to play if you just don't do the level of damage compared to like a lot of the other, I mean, like the primary AP pool of the jungle. So yeah, he belongs in the C tier for the moment. Neferi got some jungle buffs. She still underperforms in the jungle. Relatively simple to play. AD assassin scales relatively well, but belongs in the C tier for the jungle. Pantheon also belongs in the C tier for the jungle. There are some iterations which can perform a bit better. Obviously, your WMAX second. Eclipse tends to still be your standard core within jungle. There is someone performing really well on the pick in Korean solo queue. I did speak about it last time. If you want to look at picking up Pantheon jungle, it's playable. It's not terrible. It's a bit better than the Fury. Point and click CC does give him some level of strength here. It just tends to be, once again, kind of like Silas, where you're reliant on kills to kind of snowball your advantage. You don't scale particularly well. He belongs in the C tier for the moment. Zed, once again, a mid to jungle flex option. He has a really aggressive ratio on his passive, like 200%. Always being able to activate it gives him some very nice execute on camps. Doesn't have any hard CC. His ganks are pretty poor. He belongs in the C tier. He's a relatively hard to pilot champion as well. Hecarim also going to be here. Obviously, Hecarim has been underperforming for a while. They are buffing him in 14.14. But for 14.13, he still does underperform. There are some iterations of like opportunity buys which can function. We've seen some Zeke's builds on Hecarim that does tend to be pretty core at this point. Obviously, the likes of Shojin tends to be pretty early pickup alongside an Eclipse. Still underperforms, so belongs in the C tier. Not hard bound to Manamune. It hasn't been for a while, ever since they did the mana changes. Nidalee also down here. Really good for elite play. Like, this champion is one of the best AP junglers in elite. For the average player, she belongs in the C tier. I really would not recommend playing this champion. She is a very fast way to tank your LP. Eve, underperforming. Has been for a bit. They did over nerf Eve. I'm surprised they haven't buffed her back up. I believe she is on the weak side by a decent amount at the moment. She belongs in the C tier. If you can get your Medjay rolling, of course, she's still a very aggressive AP jungler, and you can very much function on like Lichbane Medjay and take over games. Obviously, Rabadon does tend to come through as a second item option. but she's still just not finding the level of results she really needs. She is in the C tier. Dropping down to the C tier, we have Gragas. The passive nerf does do something to nerf jungle Gragas. Obviously, it does remove some level of combat sustain. Obviously, Hearts is clear a bit. He's not going to come up the jungle as healthy. Obviously, primarily targeted at top lane, but yeah, some knock-on effect in the jungle. Tends to be a pretty elite skewed AP jungler anyway. You're looking at like very heavy burst. Once again, kind of like Eve, your Lich Bane, your Storm Surge in certain situations. Shadow Flame is an option, and then Magi pickup tends to be pretty crucial. But he's in the C tier for the moment. Moving on to the B tier, we have Lee Sin going up. So he had his items nerfed. He got buffed in 14.13. He now moves back up to the B tier. They gave him some health growth. They gave him some W shield. Makes his Claire a bit healthier. Gives him a bit more trading potential, gives him a bit more low elo scaling. Obviously, level scaling tends to be pretty low elo skewed thing. And yeah, it bumps him up to the B tier. He does decent damage if you can pilot the pick well. He obviously scales really aggressively with that. Like, if you're really good at the champion, he's like an S plus pick. If you're bad at the pick, he's like a D tier pick. In the middle ground, obviously, if you put like 50 games in, then yeah, he probably sits at like an A, B tier kind of level. He's fine. He's about where he should be. On top of this, we have Zyra. Obviously, Zyra incredibly pro skewed at the moment. This is basically where all this champion's play rate has suddenly picked up from. Why can't I see her? Did I add her in? I didn't. Nice. Yeah, so Zyra is very pro skewed. Obviously, you tend to see primarily like your Comet variations running Precision Tree as secondary. Really aggressive clear, really good pairing with like AD mids, really good objective taking. Just doesn't translate as well into solo queue. The success doesn't seem to be quite there. Obviously, she's a relatively new pick, so there has to be some learnings to go through. She will probably jump up as more people like adapt to another champion. I do think she'll get nerfed for pro in 14.14, but for the moment, she's like a B tier pick. If you put the games in, obviously you'll find increasing success. But yeah, for the moment, B tier. Talon is also going to be within my B tier. He is performing a bit better with some like variations of runes. Like Halo Blade seems to be doing quite well, running the likes of Ignite. He also doesn't appear to be added on. But yeah, Talon, solid option if you're looking for a bit more AD within your comp. If you feel comfortable on the pick, akin to Zed, he can work as like a mid jungle flex option. Nice invades, solid B tier option. Skarner is actually going to be dropped down to the D tier. Skarner's really bad this patch. They did over nerf him. The taking 5% max health off of his Q is just an insane amount of damage to lose. It really hurts his burst potential. It hurts his trading. It hurts his clearing. Just a lot of nerfs going in there. Obviously, the mana change is a bit more top lane skewed, but yeah, the percentage health is going to hurt both jungle and top. I'd recommend avoiding him for this patch. I wouldn't be surprised if they buff him back up in 14.14. Continuing with the B tier, we have Elise. So Elise is in an okay spot. Obviously tends to be a bit more elite skewed, as a lot of these AP junglers are. Not quite as good as some of the other picks, but obviously some of them have been nerfed down, so she does gain a bit more power through that. If you're looking for something like Elise, then honestly, I could see something like Rumble being like a solid option at the moment. Rumble is actually a really good jungler. However, he is being nerfed next patch. Obviously, he is overperforming in Elite and Pro Play at the moment. But yeah, at least very early game skewed AP jungler. She's a solid B tier option. Graves got a 2 armor buff on his E. Obviously, some of the AP junglers got nerfed this patch as well, so he does gain a bit out of that. But he still stays in the B tier for the moment. If you itemize him correctly in the game and you like play the pilots to pick well, getting good invades, getting good ganks off, you can definitely rise up. But yeah, for the moment, he's in the B tier. Trundle, honestly, I'm tempted to drop this champion down to the C tier. He's like at the back of the B tier. His pick has definitely been better in honestly, I'm going to jump on the C tier. Yeah, Trundle is very easy to play. But that's like the main thing going for this pick at the moment. But the builds just aren't really there at the moment. He's reliant on being very stat checky, and obviously a lot of the picks in the current game just really punish him. A lot of the AP champions have been nerfed, which he was pretty bad into, which could like credit him to be like low B. So he's kind of around there. But yeah, this pick definitely isn't in the greatest spot at the moment for how easy he is to pilot. Problem is, if he's ever really good, then yeah, he becomes a pretty pro-skewed pick. But for the moment, I'll leave him back a B. Consider him like a B, C tier kind of option at the moment. Sejuani, very good in pro at the moment. Okay in solo queue. You can find some level of success. If you pilot the pick well, you're getting good ganks off. landing solid ultimates, like being able to just play the map correctly for this kind of a champion. Obviously, your clear's a bit weaker. You're not as going to be as focused on that. You're going to be very reliant on a couple of synergies. Like melee champs work really nicely with this pick, enable good setup, and yeah, if you can play around some good carries, maybe you're duoed with someone, you can definitely find success on this pick. She is a solid B tier option. Teemo, I got flack for Teemo in my last tier list in 14.12. Teemo is a good jungler in mid and low elo. Like, that is just something people need to come to accept. This champion has a good clear. He has really good scaling. He's in a pretty good spot at the moment. Obviously, Dark Harvest being buffed definitely does help him. It is a solid keystone option for him. And honestly, he's underrated. I really do think people should be picking him up, especially in low and mid ranks. If you do like the champion, like, there is definitely strength in this pick. He is a good B tier option. I don't know what more to say. Moving on, we have Poppy. So Poppy is very good against high mobility picks, high dash picks where you can like make use of your W. It gives her a lot of value. I've missed out I know, have I got Poppy here? Am I blind? I am blind. Poppy, is really good into like Lee Sin, champions like that, where they are very reliant on like the mobility to be able to pilot fights correctly. Has good objective control, has relatively good clearing, good ganks. She's just a good all-round jungler. Not so much, I mean, it's a bit more counterpick reliant, which is why she doesn't really climb up into like the A and the S tier. But yeah, she's a solid B tier option. You have options in like tank variants, but I'd recommend Sundered Sky if you want a bit more agency within your games. Kayn, B tier option. Red Kayn does tend to outperform Blue Kayn at the moment. There are like variations of Blue Kayn, which you can go, obviously, like Yomu's Opportunity, Grudge being buffed definitely did help that. And yeah, there are build options there. You could also go like some Lethality Red Kayn variants, but I'd recommend primarily just a Bruiser Red Kayn in like the games you're playing, unless it is fit to go Blue Kayn, like you're playing against a lot of ranged options. Then yeah, it is something you can opt into. He's a good B tier option. Kindred does perform really well in Elite at the moment. A really solid carry option there. For more average play, isn't finding the level of success. But she's still in a solid spot. Like, you can carry games from this pick. It does just tend to be a bit harder when you're not able to get as consistent invades. Maybe you're not getting as many marks. You're a ranged carry within the jungle, which can like make team comps harder to play around. Well, like, it makes it easy. It makes it harder to draft within games. She sits within the B tier for the moment. Belveth is in a fine spot. Like, once again, tends to be a pretty elite skewed AD jungler. Very reliant on like Raptor invades, has decent dueling potential. Her build's in a fine spot. You have options in like Kraken, Terminus, Death Stance getting buffed did help for her. Stride Breaker does tend to still be a pretty core item, like Kraken Stride, and then you can like flex around. She's a solid B tier option. Shaco, both AD and AP builds. Well, I mean, AD is really good if you're just looking to be an early game skewed Halo Blades assassin, where you're looking for like really easy one taps, like into heavy range comps, into melee comps. I would really recommend AP. Obviously, Liandry, Blackfire Torch can both work really nice in this champion, and then you have like other options in AP build, Cosmic, Rabadon, stuff like that. AP is probably like an A tier build, when you can like get it to work into like your melee comps. AD is a bit lower down, sits more or less in the B tier. Nunu has options in both the Liandry and the just standard tank variations. This would be like your Sunfires, your Spirits, stuff like that, which can give him more durability. Obviously, his gank potential is really aggressive early on into the game, where you can get like really long range Ws, and it can be really punishing to play against. Doesn't scale particularly well. Relies a bit more on teammates, unless you are going like AP variations where you can have some level of solo agency. He belongs in the B tier for the moment. Wukong, once again, if you can get your items going, then he is a very strong champion, but he's very reliant on like 2-item power spikes. He just doesn't have the same level of dueling potential that he once had, and yeah, is a lot more reliant on being able to like scale up with your 2 items and be a really strong team fighter. Rek'Sai, ever since her nerfs has kind of dropped down to the B tier, she's a solid option if you're looking for something with good engage. Solid on both Titanic and Hydra. Both these items are very nice on her. It really depends on what you need within the game, whether you need that slow, whether you need a bit more burst potential. There are options there. And then like your Steric, stuff like that. Things with like health, AD tend to be pretty nice on this champion. She's a solid B tier option. And then Master Yi is the other champion here. So Master Yi got buffed really heavily in 14.10 or 14.11 I believe. And then 14.12 he got nerfed back down. He now sits at a solid B tier option. He's definitely one of the higher B tier picks. Bit better in low elo compared to what he used to be. He did for a while perform a bit better in like mid and high elo. He was actually finding a lot of success there. They have tried to unbind that with some level scaling. Yeah, he's now a solid B tier option. Moving on to the A tier. So we have a couple of champions dropping out of the A tier. We have Talia and Karthus going down to the C tier. Both these champions got hit really heavily this patch. They were overperforming in competitive for a while. And, yeah, they've both taken a hit. I'm honestly surprised they hit Talia as hard as they did. She wasn't finding the same level of competitive success or competitive play rate as Karthus, and she probably got hit harder of the two. Karthus lost a bit more damage on his Q. Again, they've tagged that ability twice. Once again, it nerfs his clear speed. It nerfs his ability to 1v1 champions. It hurts his ganks, and yeah, he's dropped from the A tier to the C tier. He was like a low A tier option for solo queue. I imagine he was still say viable in competitive for a while, but I could definitely see him falling out 14.13 onwards. But yeah, for average play, I'd kind of recommend avoiding the champion now and just playing things which are either good into it or just moving on to Lilia, who's currently the best jungler on the patch. Continuing with the A tier, so we have Gwen being added here. Gwen, obviously, a solid jungler. She got jungle buffs last season, I believe, and she's been performing decently ever since there. She's a solid scaling option. Obviously, her gank potential just isn't really there. She doesn't have any hard CC. Her slow on her ultimate is relatively limited, but she has a good clear. She has good drawing potential, and if you are able to play her into a very heavy tanky composition, she can definitely have a lot of value as an A tier pick. Shyvana is going to move up. I've been hesitant about this. I'm overall not as big of a fan of Shyvana as a lot of the other champions. She definitely has really visible punish windows, which I think is something which can be quite limiting on a pick, but she's definitely better with scale or level scaling being buffed in the jungle. They buffed jungle XP at the beginning of this split. On top of that, some of the other picks being nerfed down has helped her. It's primarily like your Liandry's and your Shojin variants, where you're like Liandry, Shojin, Rift, I believe, in like a certain order. I think it's Shojin first item actually. Yeah, she can perform quite well on that build. She does have like AP variations with your Nashas, your Rabadons. It's a bit more volatile, and if you can snowball, it can definitely find success. I'd recommend going your standard AP Bruiser variant, but yeah, there are options there. She goes up from the B tier to the A tier. She's definitely finding it a bit more success at the moment. Mordecai has really fallen off in play rate in the jungle, but he is still a good option here if you're looking for a top to jungle flex pick. His clear is in a fine spot. It's not as fast as it used to be. They've nerfed it down a bit. On top of this, they've nerfed the champion a bit just overall. He doesn't scale anywhere near as well. He already didn't scale that well, but they've hit it even more, so definitely lost a bit of power there. But he is in a fine spot as like a dueling jungler if you're looking for a bit more AP damage and you're like a top to jungle flex. He is a solid A tier pick. Morgana finding a bit more success in competitive now. We have started seeing Morgana jungle pop up again. Obviously her play rate does increase in solo queue when you see some competitive Morgana. It tends to be similar for a lot of champions, and yeah, in Morgana's case, her clear is pretty strong. Her build is also pretty good at the moment. Obviously, you have options in like Liandry, Blackfire Torch, Zonya, a really nice item on Morgana, gives her some level of frontline potential. Has good like synergies with certain teammates. If you're able to get setups for bindings, she can definitely have power there. You want an AD mid laner. If you play her alongside an AP mid laner, it can be quite punishing, but there is definitely strength to pick. She is a good A tier option. The Zac nerfs didn't really do anything. He's still a good A tier tank. The pick primarily goes like tank variations at the moment. You don't really see Liandry's as much, but I imagine it is still a good option if you're looking for a bit more carry agency. But alongside a Dark Seal, I'll always recommend picking up Dark Seal on like junglers with like solid AP ratios, so you can have some level of carry agency if you feel comfortable being in that position. Zac, good A tier pick. Once again, Echo and Diana go as a pair. Both these champions are very good at snowballing in the jungle, very aggressive AP ratios for jungle clears, relying obviously on like your Darks or your Magi purchases. Diana ult feels pretty underwhelming at the moment, but past that the pick is still in a good spot. Her clear is pretty good, her burst damage is pretty good. In Echo's case, his burst damage is also pretty good. Does tend to play a bit more like an assassin, whereas Diana can play a bit more mid-range. But yeah, both these picks still in solid spots, both good A-tier options. Briar, incredibly low elo skewed pick. Like, this champion does massively scale off with rank. She still finds some level of success in mid and low elo, and that is where my tier list is mainly targeted at, like the 99% of players. And yeah, she's an A-tier option for them. Vi, solid pick, obviously very strong and competitive for her ultimate and her pick potential. Within solo queue, she does have some level of solid dueling. Her clear is pretty good, enables you to like single out a carry, and obviously that can all be quite valuable. I would recommend Nocturne over Vi for solo queue, but yeah, you can definitely find success on this pick. She is a good A-tier option. Kha'Zix also with my A-tier. He's definitely better as one of the he's definitely one of the better AD assassin options at the moment, if not probably the best. Obviously he got buffed on his Q, gained 10 flat damage, obviously amped with his Q evolve. On top of this, we saw opportunity get buffed, which is quite a nice item for Kha'Zix. And yeah, he's a good A-tier assassin option. If you're able to snowball throughout the game, maybe you're taking like Dark Harvest with the buffs, then he is a very powerful pick. I've recently seen a Kha'Zix 1v9 A game in one of my games. Moving on, we have Viego. So Viego, obviously a very good staple jungler. He's like the second most popular after Lee Sin. And rightfully so. Like, the pick has a lot of versatility, being able to possess champions and like utilize kits, and then obviously unpossess. It gives him a lot of outplay potential, gives him a lot of carry potential. He's like not quite an S tier pick in my opinion, but he is a very good A tier pick. Obviously you have solid items like Kraken Slayer. I know Hydra for a brief period of time was pretty good on him. I don't know if it's finding the same level of success. Bork is good into like high health targets, and yeah, there's build variations there. He's a good A tier pick. Warwick, honestly, Warwick is actually pretty successful as a low and mid elo pick. The buffs last split have definitely like made him a viable champion here. He does have a lot of build varieties in like Stridebreaker, Titanic Hydra. I know Bork's viable top lane. I don't know if it's so much as viable in the jungle. And then you can go standard bruiser options, and he is a good A tier pick. Does tend to be pretty mid and low elo skewed, and a bit more reliant on enemy not really understanding the champion as much as like skill on the pick. Jarvan and Xin go hand in hand, both really easy to play AD junglers, have great setup for teammates. You do tend to be a bit more reliant on like having good teammates. Xin has a bit more carry potential than Jarvan, but they have really solid AP pairings in the mid lane. You can obviously have good agency with like Halo Blade Xin. Conquerors tend to be a bit more standard in elite and high elo. In Jarvan's case, also like your Sundered Sky, your Conks. I've seen some profane Hydra variations of these two champs. I wouldn't recommend it as standard, but into very squishy comps, it can definitely be something you opt into. They're good A-tier AD junglers. Alongside this, we have Jax, who is a good answer to Xin Zhao. Obviously, really solid into like long-range auto attackers, into AD junglers, reliant on their auto attacks. He is a good clear. He is a pretty good jungler. Definitely seen a bit more of a play rate increase this split this season, just in general, compared to some of the other seasons. He used to be a bit more standard, like really far back. I imagine like season 10 pre that used to be more popular, but it's definitely seen a bit more of a rise in popularity in season 14. A good A-tier option. Fiddlesticks and Rumble are good AP A-tier options. In Rumble's case, he is pretty strong, like as a top jungle flex option. He actually has a pretty good clear, something which a lot of people have more recently caught on to. He did get buffed when he had the 150 health, 150 heat change, and it's definitely given him some power here. In Fiddle's case, primarily just played by the OTPs, but this champ can definitely have like really good impact in the game if you are able to find the correct ult angles. If you clear effectively, then yeah, there's definitely a lot of power to this pick. Moving on from these two champions, we have Ivan and Udyr. So in Udyr's case, he is a pretty good pick on the Andries. Does definitely have power on like your AP tank variations. AD is something you can opt into if you have too much AP in your comp. I wouldn't really recommend it as standard. You tend to feel pretty squishy, and you can be a liability if you ever do fall behind. In AP's case, he tends to be pretty reliable at most stages of the game. If you drop a ult with Liandry, it can do a lot of damage. It can control team fights. Does tend to have a harder time, obviously, like you build onwards, but yeah, he's a solid A tier option. Definitely really spikes on your one item core. In Ivan's case, I believe Redemption tends to massively outperform Moonstone. It might be the other way around though. I can't remember off the top of my head. It's one or the other. It is, yeah, Redemption massively outperforms Moonstone as a first item option. It's definitely a no-brainer to rush Redemption in most situations, especially if you are very good at using that item. Moonstone works as a good secondary item, and then you can like flex around what you need, whether you need like a Mikhail's, an Ardent, a Staff. There are options there. Ivan, good A tier pick. And then we have 6 champions left. So, Nocturne, my go-to AD pick at the moment. I really do recommend this champion. It is very strong on Stride Breaker into Experimental Hexplate. Here's a very easy to understand playstyle, being able to ult side lanes, being able to ult mid lane at level 6, and yeah, just playing on your ultimate, getting your laners ahead. Has decent agency, does fall off later on into the game, but yeah, he's a very good S tier pick at the moment. Amumu, he is very easy to play. He has good build variations in both tank and like a Liandry hybrid tank variation. Yeah, his ease of play, his multi-man like ultimate combined with double Q provides him so much CC, gives him so much lockdown onto enemies, and I really do recommend this pick as like being your go-to like AP tank jungler at the moment. If you're looking, actually, I'll miss out Lydia for the moment. If you're looking for something a bit more durable than Nocturne and doing a bit more AD damage, and then doing a bit more damage than like a Mumu, then Volibear can fit in this nice middle spot as like having a bit less agency but being able to be a bit more durable, gives them some level of frontline potential. Yeah, Volibear, a great S tier option, has great gank setups, obviously with Qmax, and then yeah, your Sundered Sky, that tends to be primarily what you go. I wouldn't recommend Voro in the jungle, it does tend to get outperformed. If you're looking for a easy to play AP jungler, then Brand still exists here. He did get nerfed this patch, he is a little bit weaker, but he still fits in as a good S tier option. Obviously his easy to play, fast, clear, great team fighting, gives him so much power here. He is a great S tier option. Rammus is being bumped up to the S tier. He is great as a counter pick to a lot of the AD options, which are gaining popularity with a lot of the AP picks being nerfed. That was primarily one of the reasons why I just couldn't have him in the S tier. If you are playing Rammus, ban Lilia. That is simply what you have to do. This champion massively counters you at the moment. It is his biggest counter, and Lilia sits atop of the meta. Like, we have a good lot of jungle options which you can go to for mid and low elo. Obviously this does differ going into high elo. Like the likes of Rammus and Mumu do tend to drop down a bit, but yeah, Lilia, the best AP jungler in the game at the moment. She is in a really strong spot. Obviously a lot of the other AP junglers did get nerfed, like your Liandry's build variation tends to be what performs the best. I believe it does outperform Blackfire significantly as a first item option. It's actually pretty close. Both are solid first options. Blackfire does tend to be a bit better second, like Liandry into Blackfire, but you can go Blackfire into Liandry and still find relatively similar levels of success. And then something like a Rylai, Riftmaker is something you can opt into, Zonya, Rabadon, Cosmic, Banshee, even like Cryptbloom, stuff like that. Isn't as necessary. Obviously Lilia does do a level of true damage. On top of this, Darkseid Magi is something I'd really recommend picking up, but she has so much variation in what she can do. She is a great S plus option and my recommended go-to AP carry jungler at the moment. Yeah, scales throughout all the ranks quite nicely. Yeah, great pick. And those are my thoughts. So yeah, thank you guys for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.